This is Zuccotti Park. Does that name sound familiar to anybody? Zuccotti Park. Just a couple years ago, this was the camp and headquarters for Occupy Wall Street. This is where it all happened. Yeah, it was fascinating. I came down here once to write a story about, I'm a writer as well, about haunted cemeteries. So I was going down to Trinity and I came by here and I was drawn in. This is where they had their library, they had a food station and medical center in the center, tents all over. That's where they would hold their main meetings. It was a city, it was fascinating. Wow. But that's not why I brought you here. Actually New York's and America's first soaring tower, and like the one that we're going to talk about today, the original was also destroyed by sabotage, so they say. What happened was when the Continental Army was being chased out of here, George Washington, rumor was, look, if we can't have New York, nobody can. And fires started popping up. And so there were fires. And the first one burnt down in 1776. And this one is from 1846. And it was the tallest structure in the nation until the Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883. So it's kind of a symbol. Also, one thing that's interesting that has nothing to do with 9/11 is that the city did not have money when they were building this. So they couldn't afford marble, so they built it out of this brownstone. And at the time people said, what, you're going to use that ugly stone that's just laying around, why would you use that? But it came out so beautifully that this is what started that vogue for brownstone. That's why we have brownstones all over the city. People, suddenly everybody wanted a brownstone. But what this also has to do with 9/11, on the day, lots of people fled from the dust and debris cloud into here, and it saved their lives by running into Trinity Church, one of our most historic churches. This is what this graveyard looked like that day. Absolutely covered in the dust and debris. And then after the event, the few people who could get down to Lower Manhattan, and I'll tell you more about that later, for them this became a place of solace where they would gather, and they really ministered to the community, the church. Pretty soon you see this historic fence here that goes all the way back to the early 19th century. This was covered in notes and prayers and flowers. And so the folks at the church realized that people had a lot to express. They had so much they were feeling, so they got in on the act. They started putting up white canvas banners, and they would stand here with magic markers, and they say, is there something you'd like to say? Do you have anything? Sometimes they went through 20 banners a day. People would just pour their heart out, and they've saved and stored all those banners. I don't know where they are, but hopefully someday we'll get to see them, because again, these are the days right after the event. What we're going to do next is burials that go all the way back to 1681. For America, that's old.
Yeah, that's old for us.
So follow me and I'll show you what it has to do with 9/11. It's interesting, beautiful. These tombstones they're so worn down, they can be very difficult to read. But now that it's rained, you can see them very well. So that person I guess, died in 1779. There's lots of Revolutionary War heroes buried in here. But who I came to introduce you to is Robert Fulton. You've probably heard of him. He invented the commercial steamboat, which really revolutionized travel and trade. In fact, you see how much higher than the street we are? Than the street over there? That used to be the Hudson River. So all of that is landfill. So he actually, I'm giving a tour here, he actually had his boat running along here when he was testing it out. So that had a huge impact on the economy, but also he was on the commission for the Erie Canal. And that's really what made New York the capital of the nation's economy. But the real star here is right over here. You know where I'm headed?
I saw it.
So this is the burial place of Alexander Hamilton, the quintessential New Yorker. He, like me, he came from kind of nowhere, moved here as a teenager, no money, no background, no connections. Unlike me, he became quite powerful and famous. He was General Washington's closest aide, but he was our first Secretary of the Treasury, and he's credited with having created our financial system. So Hamilton and Fulton started New York as the base of the nation's economy, by the 19th century of the world's economy. Well, actually more in the 20th century, which of course is why Lower Manhattan was the prime target and the most potent way to strike at globalization. You know what? I bet that's the same one because there's so many one-way streets down here, so they're just circling us. It's called the Trinity Route, and it's a fascinating story. This was in St. Paul's Chapel, which is where we've just met and where we'll actually head back to. St. Paul's Chapel is right across the street from the North Tower. So listen to it. I mean, it's a remarkable story. So the tree that this was inspired by stood in the churchyard right across the street. And when the North Tower fell and all the debris went, this tree fell on top of the churchyard and it actually shielded it.
Really?
And the tree, this is a miracle. The tree is the only damage, the only thing that was damaged. We're gonna, as I said, we're gonna head there. Not a broken window, not a crack. So this tree really saved that church. So this is inspired by the tree. Artist Steve Tobin was so inspired by that, and it's the only damage, the tree, that he made this sculpture of its roots, and it symbolizes connectedness and strength. Which this puddle here. That is Battery Park. The building to the right of it is where the city was founded as a trading post. So, you know, of course, New York has always been about making money. And where you see the trees, Battery Park, did you go down there? Did you go to Statue of Liberty? Did you see so you went to Statue of Liberty, where you get in line for the ferry. Walker, and he did a lot of these beautiful mosaics, but it starts dark and it gets brighter and brighter like a flame. It's really phenomenal. I've tried to pretend like I got business, but I can't pull it off. I can't get past there. The servants' entrance, I suppose, of the New York Stock Exchange, and we're going to go around and take a look at its impressive main facade.
Hey, maybe
These are the only remnants of the original wall of Wall Street. These are the pillars that went into the ground. The wall that the Dutch built in 1653. This is all that's left of it. Ironically, so this is where New York used to end. This used to be the northern boundary of New Amsterdam, I guess I should say, and New York. So they built this wall to protect them from the British. But the British came from that way, from the water, so they were looking the wrong way. It didn't work out so well. And they say that even within a decade after it was built, people were already taking it apart for firewood and home improvements, so it never really served its function, but it made this great wide space, which is now, of course, Wall Street. So here we are at the epicenter of the nation's financial industry, and actually now, as I'll tell you a little bit more, of the world's financial industry. The action all used to be down there at the wharf. There used to be, unfortunately, a slave market down there, and then later it became a grain market. And you see this big street here? This is called Broad Street, and the reason it's so much wider than all the other streets down here is because there actually used to be a canal that ran up it. And if you can see where the barriers are there with the red stripes, ships used to come all the way up to there to unload their supplies. But the reason this is the epicenter of America's financial industry, there are a couple reasons. A, this historic site, one of the most historic sites in our nation. This was the British City Hall. There used to also be a pillory here, so if you misbehaved, now we just shame you on Facebook or whatever, but if you misbehaved in the past, you might get tied up here in front of the building for public derision. But this is also where, in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was read in New York. It's read before in Philadelphia, of course. You see our friend George Washington there. That is where he took the oath of office as the first American president, and then this became the site of the nation's first capitol, where Congress met and where they adopted the Bill of Rights. So a very historic building. This building is from 1842. The original, they tore down in 1812. Believe it or not, they sold it for $412 in scraps. Bargain, right? And so this one went up in 1842. And you see how it looks a lot like buildings in Washington, that same style. A bunch of traders got together who traded stocks and bonds and said, you know what, we've got to get organized about this. We can't have these fly-by-night people coming in. So they got together under a buttonwood tree, and they hammered out an agreement called the Buttonwood Agreement, and that is still today the basis of trading that goes on today. So think about it. Wall Street was founded to regulate the way they do business. And you'll see a little tree right over there. Can you see it with the little mealy looking tree there? That is not the buttonwood tree, but that's kind of a symbol of that original buttonwood tree. So that was 1791, and then they built this monumental building in 1903, the New York Stock Exchange. That is the largest trader of securities in the world. If you want, we can move over a few steps so you get a better look. Largest trading of securities, billions of dollars a day. And in 2007, they merged with Euronext, and so it's now the largest trader of stocks and bonds in the world. Trillions of dollars. So this is the House of Morgan. Have you all heard of J.P. Morgan? Very famous, very wealthy. If you have to ask, you got no business inside. So he didn't really invite. But if you'll walk this way with me a bit, there's something I want to show you over here. This is Wall Street just after the Revolutionary War. There's Trinity Church, the old one. So it looks kind of like a country lane, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And this is the old Federal Hall that stood there. So we're kind of in the same spot. Hard to imagine Wall Street like that. Exchange. What I will tell you about the stock exchange, on September 11th, after the second plane hit, they shut down and they evacuated. They didn't reopen. That was a Tuesday morning. They didn't reopen until the following Monday. They couldn't really keep up operations. People couldn't get down here. Some of the trading firms that they traded, if you ever get a chance to see, it's just heartbreaking. And they lost $1.4 trillion in the first 5 days they got back to trading. It's said that 70% of the world's trade stopped 70%. So the impact
It wasn't just us.
it wasn't just us, and
Japan and all the countries they just
Yeah.
couldn't do it without us.
and then of course the airline industries, and the world was changed in that moment. So we're going to go up these steps. They're kind of steep, so if you need the railing, feel free to use that. They're 1842 steps. They're not. I don't want to rush you, babe. We'll go on inside. This great space. You'd be surprised. Few New Yorkers come in here. People don't really know it's open to the public, as historic as it is. Couple things about this place before 9/11. So I told you it opened in 1842. Then in 1846, President Lincoln made this part of the Treasury Department. So this was the big money warehouse for the U.S. And before that, it was a customs house. And so what would happen is the sailors and merchants, they'd come from the wharfs and they'd bring their lists here, and this is where they'd pay their duties and their taxes. And before we had income tax in 1919, that was where most of the money to run the government came from. So this was an important building. That moved out of here with President Lincoln. It eventually moved in 1973 to 6 World Trade Center. Not the best move, right? So come on over here, this great rotunda. So this is a real old bank vault. It used to be deeper. You can see those aren't the old walls. But this would have been packed with the nation's cash. This is where they kept it, behind this door.
That's amazing.
It is, isn't it?
Are you guys going to post me this? Or are you too shy? They're going to be too shy.
On September 11th, 300 people took refuge in here. This building saved 300 people's lives when they rushed in here. And also, right here under this rotunda is where they put on display the 6 finalists for the design for the memorial. And here in New York, you know, we have an opinion about everything, but especially we all felt very connected to that space and what it should be. So the public comment, I don't know how much they took it into account, but the chance for people to see and give their feedback was very, very important. Also, the 6 finalists, or the 3 finalists for the new Freedom Tower were displayed here. So again, bringing in New York and the community into this space. But there's one more thing about September 11th, if you follow me. Not many people know about this. The towers fell. They hit the ground with the force of a small atomic bomb. And it shook the neighborhood. And it created cracks in the foundation of this old building. And look right here. Look at the marble. And that's not Scotch tape. That's not from Home Depot. They are measuring. They've shut this building down a few times, and if that crack gets beyond a certain point on that measurement, well, if they yell run, follow me, because they've evacuated this building a few times. It takes a lot to crack marble like that. So really interesting. And as I said, they've had to shut the building down a few times to try to stabilize it.
Here as well? Or is that something else?
That looks like it was the porch that was out front. So this is where George Washington stood when he took the oath of office in 1789. So they saved the porch. Yeah, well, if you follow me right over here. So this is not for the amusement of skateboarders. This is a security barrier. bridges and airports. Not Manhattan real estate, but they've got a lot of power and a lot of money. A lot of government money, right? That is actually why the World Trade Center was and is where it is. It was originally going to be over here, and the Port Authority said, we're New York and New Jersey. We at least have to be able to see it. So that's how it ended up over on the west side. And then finally, he called on his brother, Nelson Rockefeller, who just happened to be the governor of the state. Nice to have connections, right? So the three of those three entities together were really behind the World Trade Center. They really pushed. Finally, and the project just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, their press rep said, you know what you need, you know what you need? You've got to have the two tallest buildings in the world in the center. That'll really get attention. So in 1966, they took 14 historic blocks over there. They were called Radio Row. Most of the buildings dated back to around the Civil War, and leveled those 14 blocks and made these two super blocks. You see how there's no streets in there. These are called super blocks. 1970, the first business moved into the North Tower. In 1972, into the south. Well, by the late 80s, it was totally full of finance, like it was supposed to be. It really was a center of global trade. 500,000 people worked in there from 90 nations, all working together in those 16 acres. 500,000, 500,000 people every day worked in there.
Those financial.
93, a truck bomb exploded in the
garage.
Right, in the underground garage. 150-foot crater. 6 people were killed. I almost said only 6 people, but that's a ridiculous thing to say. 6 people were, but when you think, 500,000 people are in the complex.
When that happened, it was horrible when people were coming out of those towers and running for their lives.
And based on what I hear, it was at that time nobody knew. Yeah, he did it. Yeah. So yeah, it's something that'll stay with Americans forever.
I think so, yeah. Absolutely. So what I'm going to show you, any ideas what this is? This big building? This is that's kind of pretty over there with the mist over the East River. Can you see it? There's Brooklyn through there.
Yeah.
Kind of looks like an old, like a 1930s painting to me.
Right.
So anyway, but I digress. This is the New York branch of the Federal Reserve Bank.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And what happened was, during the 19th century, hard to believe this, but the reckless traders on Wall Street, about every 20 years, they would almost bankrupt the country. Over and over. And we had no central bank, so like one time JP Morgan just reached into his pocket or his coffers and put out a bunch of money to keep America from going bankrupt. You know, they would just do whatever they needed to do and leave the mess. So the government realized that we needed a central bank. We couldn't rely on private banks. And so the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913 to oversee banking, to monitor the nation's money supply, and to regulate banking. Some people, well, I better not get into more politics anyway. But the reason this is most famous, and by the way, this is a 1920. It's a relatively modern building, but it's designed to look like an Italian palazzo, like a fortress from Florence or Tuscany. There's great lanterns there, and those cast iron lanterns. But it's most famous because 5 stories under the ground is over 1/4 of the world's gold supply. 7,000 tons of gold, around 540,000 gold bars. Imagine. It's in
that movie where they went into the vault.
That was the one.
There's a Die Hard. Yeah.
The vaults underneath.
That's here, yeah.
That's right here, exactly. It's behind a door that weighs 90 tons, if you can imagine. And most of the gold is not America's. Most is for foreign governments and organizations. They like to have their gold here because A, they're so close to the financial system, B, the security, the unrivaled security, and C, when they need to trade amongst each other, sometimes one nation owes another nation money, they just wheel some gold bars from one.
Are you kidding?
I'll get the gold bars. Yeah, amazing, right?
That's amazing.
In fact, I don't know if this is true, but I never let a good story stop me. One of the other older guides I know says, yeah, during the during the Iranian hostage, there was a truck that pulled up, drove some gold bars around another entrance, and it went in, and that's when the hostage was released, when the payment was received. Yeah. right here. 66, I told you how Trinity Church burnt down in 1776, so they didn't have money to rebuild it right away, so this became the main church for New York. This is where, as we'll see when we go inside, where George Washington used to worship, and all the original Congress, so this was the main church of New York. But look right there, you can see straight through. The North Tower was just 70 feet on the other side of that street. And so we'll go through the graveyard in a minute, but that's where that tree stood. That tree that fell over and protected everything. And we'll see a picture inside too of just how close those. You see where the new tower is. It was closer than this. So what? The Reverend, I've read some interviews with him. He saw what happened like everyone else. September 12th, he figures he'll come down here, see if there's anything that can be salvaged from the church. He comes, he sees part of that smoke part and that steeple rising through the clouds, and he said, it's a miracle, which it really is. And he said, I felt like, not that we're more special, not that we're more important, but we were spared because we had an important job to do. So he immediately got to work, and this place is amazing. I'll just tell you before we go in, here's what this fence used to look like. Like the fence I told you about before, just covered in notes and well wishes and flowers. This is called the Bell of Hope. It was given to New York from the City of London on September 11th, 2002, and it's cast from the same foundry in East London that the Liberty Bell was cast from. It's rung every year on September 11th, and this is a layout of the old September 11th, the old World Trade Center. Thank you. So you can see where the two towers were and the other buildings that were around there. London, by the way, UK lost the second highest number of casualties, 67.
Now they have a memorial, don't they? When you were there, they have a 9/11 memorial in London.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our panels across the water.
So right over here is where the tree was, the sycamore tree. Again, no damage, completely protected. I mean, not even the graves were knocked over.
I know. They're still standing.
One World Trade Center. They've stopped calling it the Freedom Tower, although the name is kind of stuck. But in this corner will be, that's number 1 World Trade Center. Number 2 will be right here in this corner. Eventually, they don't have the money raised and they don't have any tenants. So,
Does it look the same?
no, hopefully I'll be able to show you what it looks like. So that, and while I think that's relatively ugly myself, one thing that is interesting about that design is they say on September 11th every year, the light will hit the roof in such a way that it will shine right down and illuminate the pools every September 11th. But as I said, no tenants, no money raised, so that could be a decade.
Yeah.
Who knows? They haven't even begun with that one. This is a statement building. This is the new transportation hub by Salvador Calatrava. He's a famous Spanish architect. It's supposed to look like a dove, the wings of the dove about to... Really?
Lovely.
Really?
Beautiful.
It's very controversial. It's going to be... is that a stop? Or hopefully he'll move in. kind of like the old World Trade Center. And then when you go down, but the light you'll get, you know, real sunlight, like 60 feet down below the ground. And so there's what it'll all be white. That's what it will look like when it's finished. Don't believe in this. No, they've incorporated it into other things in small bits, including I guess I should have showed you in St. Paul's there was a cup that was from metal, from the cross, yeah, right? But little bits. I do believe there's some from the steel in just a little bit of it in One World Trade Center, and you'll see. There behind. So that was the last to fall. And it was the first to reopen. It's actually not on the World Trade Center site, so the developer was able to just go ahead without all that craziness and red tape. But so 1 is open, 7 is open,